You are listening to the Auditory Entertainments production of Flowering Evil by Margaret St. Clair, performed by Miranda Johnson and Ryan Johnson. Captain Hjalmar Bjornson shook his graying head as he sat across from Amy Dinsmore on her sunlit patio, a plate of little gala nut cookies between them on an old lucite platter.
I've never seen a plant I like the look of less. I don't know how he got it through the planetary plant quarantine. Take my advice, Amy. Watch out for it.
He grabbed another cookie from the platter and bit into it with satisfaction. I don't know what you're getting at, or why you're so set against my poor little Rambler. You know perfectly well that Robert would never send me anything the least bit dangerous. Bjornson paused, with a cookie halfway to his lips.
Wouldn't send you anything dangerous. Amy, have you forgotten your face was swollen for 2 weeks from that tree cutting he sent you? The doctor said it was a contact poison worse than sumac, and he tried to get you to go to the hospital. What about the time that cactus from the Blue Desert went to seed, and I spent 36 hours picking spines out of you? What about...
Amy gave a warning sniff, and Bjornson caught himself.
All right. I know how fond you are of Bob, and I know you don't like me pointing out his mistakes. I'll grant you, he means well, but he's flighty, scatterbrained, reckless. To use an expression that was popular when I was young, Bob's a twerp.
Amy pulled the cookie platter so far to her side of the table that Bjornson couldn't reach another one without getting up and stretching across the tablecloth. I don't agree with you. Robert is a splendid young man, so thoughtful and considerate. He takes a real interest in my soap carvings, you know. And how many young men with an important position like his, third mate on a space freighter with a regular scheduled run, who like that would remember to send back plants from every port of call to his auntie on Earth? I wouldn't be surprised if I won a blue ribbon at the flower show again this year. My golden rain plant is about to bloom. Robert tells me it's a lovely thing. The captain cast a longing glance at the cookie plate.
Well, don't say I didn't warn you. When's Bob due in port?
Around the 25th. He sent me a message. Here, have another cookie. I need to think up something special to cook for him as a surprise. The captain grabbed a handful of cookies and stood up to leave.
Your regular cooking is plenty good enough for me. But if you mean something like those little shrimp fried in batter you made last time he was here, go right ahead. And, watch out for that plant.
He stalked off across the lawn. Amy watched him limp around a flower bed. Bjornson had prosthetic surgery after losing his foot. And though it had been successful, grafts were never as flexible as the real thing. He's getting old, Amy thought. Really old. He ought to see a specialist. She'd tell him so next time he came by, talking about Robert that way. She set the dial on the robot gardener to weeding dandelions, and headed along the path to the little hothouse where most of Robert's plants were growing. Even in the deep tropics, Earth was too cold and dry for most of them. The Martian plants, on the other hand, were in a climate-controlled lean-to with humidity sensors and infrared lamps to keep the temperature up during the day. The heavy, moist air of the hothouse made Amy pant a little as she entered. But how fascinating it was! The leaves of her Venusian plants were of remarkable variety, thick and leathery, thin and dry like parchment, hanging in heavy serpentine coils or bristling sharp as spears. Their coloring ranged from deep pink through silky taupe and indigo to an angry metallic blue. As for the flowers, all you could do was stand there with your mouth open and stare. She stopped in front of the plant Robert had sent her most recently. Yes, Bjornson was definitely losing his edge. How could anyone think this poor, dried-up little thing was harmful? It was nothing but a bundle of withered stems, with a tiny new leaf or two to show it was alive. It did look a little better than yesterday, though. The growth solution must have helped. Amy brushed a few dead flies from the ledge behind it and tossed them into the composter. She liked to keep things tidy. Now, what should I cook as a surprise for Robert?
You aren't looking well, Amy.
Captain Bjornson studied her with the critical attention of an old friend. It was 3 to 4 weeks later, and they were playing a lazy game of Morola in the cool shade of the side patio.
You've got a lot of makeup on, but you still look tired. What's the matter? You worried about Bob? Don't worry, ships don't get hit by meteor swarms anymore. Not like when I was a third mate.
Amy shook her head. She picked up one of the brightly colored game pieces and fidgeted with it. I haven't been sleeping well. I've had such unpleasant dreams. Horrible things.
What about? That plant? Honestly, Amy, it looks like some kind of spider to me.
No! I don't know why you can't leave my Venusian Rambler alone. Robert told me it was a very valuable plant. Rare even in its own habitat. It's doing beautifully. A spider. I wish you'd stop trying to ruin it for me.
I'm sorry. Forget it. Go on. Tell me about your dreams.
Well, on Tuesday, or was it Wednesday? No, it must have been Tuesday, because that was the day after I flew over to Hartford. I was down by the hothouse, and I found the most awful thing beside the path. I've been dreaming about it ever since.
What was it?
I suppose it must have been a rabbit once. One of the wild ones. Only it was nothing but some fur and bones. Not decayed, Hjalmar. Just gone. I can't imagine what happened to it.
I think you should see a therapist. Nightmares can be very serious.
Oh, I suppose so. I really dread going to sleep. The next morning, very early, Amy turned on the light with unsteady fingers. What a horrible dream. She could hardly believe it hadn't been real, that she was safe in her own bedroom after all. Outside, the noise that had woken her, the jagged, unearthly yowling of a pair of tomcats prowling in the moonlight, came again. Usually it was a sound she hated. The poor things always sounded like they were in deadly agony. But right now she was grateful. If those cats hadn't cried and woken her up, she might still be asleep and dreaming about blood. She switched the ceiling display to summer sky, her favorite, so calm and blue, and lay back on her pillow, trying to relax. One thing was certain. She wasn't going to take this much longer. She didn't believe in pampering herself, but if she had that dream one more time, she was going to take Bjornson's advice and see a therapist. She tried to fix her mind on her gardening, on how well her plants were doing, but it wasn't working. When she tried to keep her thoughts on the Venusian Rambler, why did they call it a rambler? It was turning into a large, stocky bush, more like an oversized camellia than anything else. But her thoughts kept veering back to her dream, and all that. She'd think about Robert instead. She was a lucky woman to have a nephew like him. She'd worked out several menus with all his favorites, but she wished she could think of something a little different. There were so few kinds of meat when everything was said and done. Lamb, beef, musk ox, and bolo, and pork. and she always thought that Bolo was a little stringy and tough. Gradually, Amy's nerves began to quiet. The cats had grown silent too, except for an occasional burst that sounded like lightning made audible. Her thoughts drifted from Robert to her soap carving. After a while, she went to sleep. The morning was sunny and bright, and she felt almost embarrassed at having let a dream affect her so badly. She had finished her morning inspection of the hothouse and the succulent shed, and was heading back to the house when she noticed a bundle lying against the hothouse wall. At first she didn't recognize it for what it was, and bent down, poking at it with the stick. After a moment, she straightened up, nauseated, remembering where she had last seen that ginger-colored fur. The bundle was the remains, not very bulky, of a cat, bones and some patches of hide. Hadn't there been some white fur, too? The remains of 2 cats.
"I should call Hjalmar. There must be some wild animal near the hothouse. A lynx or a wild cat or something. Something quick and bloodthirsty." But on second thought, Robert would be in port in a couple of days. If she asked Hjalmar to help, he'd either make an enormous fuss — she still remembered the time she'd asked him to put a towel rack up, and he'd arrived with socket wrenches, an electric drill, and 4 pair of pliers — or he'd dismiss her concerns entirely. Either way, it wouldn't help. She'd wait for Robert. Robert was so comforting. If only she didn't have more of those dreams. Despite her fears, her next night's sleep was deep and sweet. She hadn't felt so rested in weeks. She put the sleep spray back in the closet. Maybe if she thought to use it sooner, she wouldn't have had those nightmares, and decided to do some soap carving after breakfast. Robert would be disappointed if she didn't have something new to show him. Besides, some of her best cooking ideas came to her while she was working on a carving. She got out her modeling knives and a couple of cakes of soap. It was hard to come by, since most people use synthetic detergents now, but she knew of a little shop in Perth that still carried it. This latest batch had a wonderful texture. She rotated the living room on its axis until the light was just right, then sat down at her carving desk. She'd do a plaque, a flower in low relief. For some reason, she didn't feel like thinking about animals at the moment. She had sketched out the design and was beginning to carefully pick it out from the background when a thought struck her. She hadn't been down to the hothouse this morning to check on her plants. Why, that would never do. She mustn't neglect them. It was terribly important. Very, very important. Her head hurt. How dizzy she felt. She had to go at once. She just had to go. Go! Cake of soap in one hand, knife in the other, panting, Amy set out toward her plants in a stumbling run. She was halfway to the hothouse before it occurred to her to question the impulse that had torn her away from her carving and set her moving blindly toward the greenhouse. And by then, it was too late. She was no longer in control. The mental grip that had drawn the rabbit and the cats to their deaths had locked on to her. Remote from her own body, frozen in a glass cage of fear and helplessness, Amy watched her feet moving briskly down the path. "If I could only cry out and call for Hjalmar."
She felt the muscles of her throat straining, but no sound came out. And now she was standing before the hothouse, and her hand had opened the door. The Rambler was waiting for her. Very slowly, like a person flexing an arm, it reached out one of its stocky branches toward her. Amy saw
that at the end of the branch, hidden under the dark green, glossy leaves, was a slender, translucent, hollow thorn. It was about the size of a hypodermic needle. Amy knew exactly what was about to happen. First the hollow thorn, until her veins were dry. Then the slowly opening maw, gaping above the big, swollen base that the thick leaves had previously concealed. It would take a long time, but Hjalmar would never miss her before it was too late. The Rambler's branch moved delicately over Amy's right wrist. The other branches drooped limply, waiting while it searched for the exact spot. It hesitated for a moment, and then Amy's mouth drew into a soundless cry of pain as the thorn struck home. A dark fluid began to stain the hollow thorn. Just for a fraction of a second, the Rambler's mental grip on Amy relaxed. She could feel its blind concentration shift to its own bloodlust satisfaction. And in that fraction of a second, Amy hurled the cake of soap straight into the Rambler's fleshy maw. The Rambler seized at her mind again, but its grip was weak and erratic. Its branches began to churn around the fleshy base they'd been shielding, slowly at first. Then, in a furious heaving, the thorn was jaggedly ripped from her wrist. Amy, her wrist streaming with blood, stared at the Rambler for one moment, then lunged at it with the knife. Afterward, sitting on the ground outside the hothouse, her forehead on her hands, feeling sick and faint. But Amy had an idea. At first, she pushed it away. It was far-fetched, silly, even a little repulsive. But was it so silly? Even pigs weren't exactly dainty about what they consumed. If she parboiled it in several changes of water, and then braised it slowly, with just a hint of ginger in the sauce, well, after all, why not? Amy picked up the modeling knife and went back into the hothouse.
Aunt Amy, this meat is incredible. I've eaten local food on 4, if you count the stuff they serve on Uranus. And it's my honest opinion that there isn't a better cook anywhere in the system than you. That's a fact. How do you do it?
Amy lowered her eyes. She could feel herself blushing through her makeup.
Oh, thank you, Robert.
She sure is, Bob. She's the best cook on Earth. But when you're in port, she gets sort of, inspired. What kind of meat is this, though? And could I have some more?
Of course.
She refilled Robert's plate.
It's something new I found at the big market in the city.
By the way, Aunt Amy, after I sent you that plant, I heard it was supposed to be carnivorous. I forgot to mention it to you in my last message. You didn't have any trouble with it, did you?
No, it died. I had to throw it out. Too bad.
Amy brightened.
Pass your plate, Robert, dear.
You have been listening to the Auditory Entertainments production of Flowering Evil by Margaret St. Clair, performed by Miranda Johnson and Ryan Johnson. If you enjoyed this performance, please give a like, leave a comment, and subscribe. Thank you for listening.